Hey guys, and welcome to the first video in the series where we will be learning about the advanced X's and O's of football. The goal is that by the end of the series that you will have a complete understanding of how offenses and defenses think and operate, and you'll also learn a bit about the chess match that goes on back and forth between them. To start the series, we're going to go over some basic refresher concepts that you should probably already know, but it's pretty good to go over them anyways. And first we're just going to go over some basic defenses that we're going to use in the first few videos. So on the top left here we have a cover 2 zone defense. We have 5 short defenders responsible for short zones, and because they're not responsible for anything deep, they should all be playing press. They're going to disrupt receivers' timings, and then we have 2 safeties playing deep zones. They're each responsible for half of the field, and they will just catch whichever receivers do come deep. This is pretty good against the pass because we can press and because our safeties are in position, but it's pretty weak against the run, especially the inside run. Our short corners are pretty effective against runs outside the tackles, but inside the tackles, we do not have the numbers advantage on the offense. And then to the right here, we have a cover 3 zone defense, and conversely with our corners, now our corners are taking deep zones. So they're going to be responsible for the deep thirds of the field. One of our safeties will stay deep in the middle of the field and take a deep third, and then our other safety will rotate short and take one of the 4 short zones. This is much better against the run because one of our safeties is coming down, but it's not as strong against the pass because we don't really have the option to press very effectively or safely. If our corners played press, and say that receiver just got a great release or just got off the press really well and started beating that receiver up the sideline, you don't have a safety sitting there kind of on the deep half of the field like you do in cover 2 to help out. So it would really require just an insane middle of the field safety that could make that break outside to the sidelines and kind of break up a pass if that did happen. But there are a few teams that do have the personnel to do this, and the most popular one is the Seattle Seahawks, where they have these big, physical, strong corners that are great at press, but then they're also agile enough to recover after press and chase up the sidelines, and then they also have a all-pro free safety that can make every play on the field, so they can do that pretty safely, but that's kind of an anomaly. That's not usually the norm. So that's kind of the 2 zone defenses we're going to be using in the first few videos, and then on the bottom left here, we have cover 1 man. Man defense just stating that they're covering the receiver across from them, and that we have one safety taking just kind of a middle of the field and then another safety taking a short middle of the field, kind of just helping on any routes going towards the center. So if any of these 3 plays or any of the concepts that we just talked about are kind of foreign to you, you don't know the difference between a zone defense or a man defense, or if I say cover 3 zone and you don't instantly know that that means 2 outside corners taking a deep third and then a safety taking a deep middle, if that just doesn't click in your head, then I'm going to put some extra reading or some videos inside the description, and it would be good to either stop the video and check those out, or after the video to make sure you check those out, because kind of the assumption is that you understand these basic concepts as we move forward, and if you don't, you're going to get lost pretty quickly. So definitely check those out if you want some extra learning there. So there's one more thing we're going to talk about before we really get into this, and that's the idea that X's and O's does not care about personnel. So in the top left here, if I just drew a basic concept, the X's and O's of this play does not care who these players are. This outside receiver, this outside eligible receiver, does not care if that's a running back, a tight end, a wide receiver. It makes no difference to the routes. We don't care what personnel we're in. We could have all tight ends on the field. It doesn't change that concept. We could have all wide receivers on the field. It doesn't change that concept. So personnel does not directly affect plays. It indirectly affects plays because changes in personnel affects matchups between the offense and defense, and then matchups determine what plays are better than others, but it does not directly say what play you can run because you have someone on the field. And that's the same for the defense. So if we pop back up kind of the zones, in a cover 2 defense, it doesn't matter if we're in our 4-3 base defense or we're in a dime defense. Our 2 slot defenders, it doesn't matter if they're outside linebackers or if that's your nickel and dime corner, it's the same zones. The technique is the same, their responsibilities are the same. So when we talk about X's and O's, we don't really care about who the X, the Y, the Z, what if that's a linebacker, if it's a corner. It's kind of all the same to us because kind of X's and O's does not discriminate on personnel. So that's just kind of the intro to the series, kind of the basics that we're just going to talk about. So now let's get into the meat of it. Our first topic in the series will be passing offenses. Today we're going to be talking about receivers and routes specifically. We're not concerned about each individual route possible or even a route tree. What we are going to do is analyze the specific ways that routes or receivers as a whole get open versus man or zone. So the first thing we're going to look at is leverage. We're going to be looking at pre-snap and post-snap leverage. So an example of pre-snap leverage is if on the top left here, this outside defender, say he lined up super deep. So that's like 12 yards, 11, 12 yards off of our receiver. We have so much space between our receiver and the defender pre-snap. Something we can do is on the snap, just have our receiver not run a route. He would just turn and look at the QB, and our QB would just throw him the ball. And then he would get 4 or 5 yards before that defender actually came up to make a tackle. And then say our receiver makes a miss and he gets up the sideline. Who's going to make the tackle? It's probably just going to be one of these safeties has a chance to come over and make the play. It's probably not going to be like a slot defender. Like, that's a lot of space that he has to get out there and run and chase him. So you can see there how just the space we had before the snap between the receiver and the defender, the pre-snap alignment or the pre-snap leverage, got us a wide open player. And that's something that was pretty common in college football for a few years. It's kind of phased out a little bit, but what the receivers were taught to do, the outside receivers were taught to do is at the start of every play, how deep is your defender? No matter if they were in a running play or a passing play, he'd look, say, okay, is that guy 8 or more yards off the line of scrimmage? Well, I'm going to instantly audible my route. I'm not going to run a route. I'm just going to look at the QB, and he's going to throw me the ball. We get a free play, and we get a good chunk of yards out of it. So that's something that was only really seen in college football. You don't really see that at the professional level, but something we do see at the professional level is if we look at the slot defender here, say before the snap, he kind of walked up to the line of scrimmage and he was showing blitz. And then based off of, we just know the team's tendencies or we just watched enough film to know that when this slot defender comes up and shows blitz, he's going to be blitzing, and that we know either a safety has to come up and take his responsibility or a linebacker has to come out and take his responsibility. Either way, if we just ran like a simple out route by that slot receiver, we know that we have enough either vertical leverage on that safety that has to come down, or we have enough horizontal leverage on that linebacker that has to come out. We have a pretty easy throw and catch. And once again, that's something that's a lot more common at the professional level, where these quarterbacks are super smart and just do insane amount of film works on these teams, and they know kind of their rotations after blitzes and that they're really good at abusing them. So that's some good examples of pre-snap leverage. What we're going to be talking about next is kind of post-snap leverage. So post-snap leverage is when we use our receiver's body, his body positioning, to get open. So on the left here, if our receiver ran a streak route or a go or a fly, they're all the same thing. That's just different words for the same thing. What he is taught to do is not just simply run really fast up the sideline and see if he can get open. He actually has very specific technique in that what he's taught to do is to blow by the defender, but then get on top of him and do something called stacking. Stacking the defender is when you get perfectly in line and you stand basically straight in front of him as he's chasing you. And what that does is that we give our quarterback a window to throw over the top. And perfect case scenario is if we drew a vertical line through the defender to our receiver, we'd want to be right in front of him. And then if our QB does throw it over the top, how does the defender make a play on the ball, right? He can't go through us. That's a penalty. He has to go around us, and he can't really do that, right? So that's a good example of post-snap leverage, or using our body to get open. And a kind of a good counterpoint to that is on the right here. Say we ran a fade route. There's a key difference between a fade and a streak route, and that most people don't understand this, and that a streak route, or the fly route that we just went open, that uses vertical post-snap leverage to get open, where we're throwing the ball over the top of the defender to get open. And a fade route is where we use horizontal leverage. So on the right here, our receiver on a fade route is actually taught to get in the side hip of the defender. He's not taught to run past the defender, but to get next to him. And what he does is he gets into the hip of the defender and gets horizontal on him. Now, once again, if we drew that line horizontally through the defender, we'd want our receiver directly on his hip. And what we do is we tell the QB, just throw it towards the sideline. And what we do is we just push the defender as far inside as we can, and we just tell the QB, throw it in whatever space we have between the receiver and the sideline. The farther in we are as a receiver, the more space our QB has to throw the ball between this space right here. And we use the horizontal positioning to tell the defender, you can't get around this to make a play on that ball on the sideline. So if kind of the scenario is where we have the receiver and the defender, and there's no space for that defender, because where is he going to go around? He can't. Go through? He can't. So you're really putting the defender in a position where he has to make a play on the receiver instead of the ball. And that's really important, that we're using our body to put ourselves between the defender and where the throw is coming. So that's pre-snap leverage, and that's post-snap leverage. And this also holds true for pretty much any route versus man. You're talking about using leverage. So if we talked about a deep out route, it would be the same thing. We would want our receiver to get up into the side of the defender and then run his out route. And then what that would do is, if we drew that horizontal line, we'd want our receiver perfectly horizontal so that our quarterback just throws it into the space to the outside. So that's pretty much that's using our body or using leverage to get open. And this is mainly used against man. We're not really talking about zone when we're talking about using leverage to beat the defense. So another way that we can beat man defenses is actually pick routes. So if we drew a slant and out right here on the right, a pick route is when we run our slant, or in this case when we do a slant and out pick route, our receiver running the slant, this outside receiver, he's actually going to kind of ignore his slant route. He's not really cared about running a good slant route. What he does care about is getting into that slot defender. So in man coverage here, this outside defender is going to chase the slot route, and this slot defender is going to be staring at our slot receiver, and as he comes up and breaks out, he wants to be able to chase him in a straight line and get to that outside route. But what our slant is going to do is he's going to run directly into the hip of this defender. And he's just he doesn't really care about running a good slant route. He just wants to get there and just get in his way. And that forces the defender to either run over him, which he really doesn't want to do because that makes that throw wide open, but he also doesn't want to run underneath it, because something that this out route can do is it can turn into a wheel or an out and up. And that's a pretty common thing that you've probably seen, is that a team has run kind of a slant wheel pick play, and that this defender just gets insanely picked by this outside receiver, and that wheel route is just wide open, goes for like 50 yards and a touchdown. You could argue that this shouldn't be legal, that you shouldn't be able to just kind of like run into defenders or get in their way, but it's a part of the game, and it's something that gets used a ton, especially at the first down markers or goal line. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the Patriots run just simple things like slants and outs or any type of pick play on the goal line, where they're just running receivers into defenders, and they're usually running kind of like a slot receiver outside just under the end zone line, and it's wide open, just the defender gets caught in a lot of traffic and it's a touchdown. That's something that you see a lot, especially by teams like the Patriots on the end zone. So that is kind of how we beat man. That's kind of the two primary ways that we beat man defenses, is either using leverage pre-snap or post-snap, or by using pick plays. There's more ways to get open versus man, but with X and O's, that's kind of the main ways that we really care about. We don't really care too much about like personnel mismatches, like speed mismatches or size mismatches, because that's not something that you can articulate through X's and O's. We don't merely draw a line up the line of scrimmage and say, well, our receiver is faster than that defender, it's a touchdown. Like that's not how X's and O's works. So what we're going to be talking about next is beating zone coverages. So if we delete all of this here, how we beat zone defenses is that we stretch the zones. We're going to be either using vertical or horizontal stretches on zones to beat them. So if we pulled up our cover 2 again, say we ran a smash concept. And the smash concept is our outside receiver runs a hitch, and our slot receiver runs a corner post or a sideline post route. And what we have here is we have a vertical stretch on this short defender. And what happens is that we're trying to bait this short corner, this flat defender, into sitting on this hitch route. And what happens is that this safety has an insanely hard time making it outside onto this corner post route, especially when we're going to have a little bit of vertical and horizontal leverage as we're coming deep. Because you have to realize that this half of the field defender is responsible for a lot. Like, there could be another route coming up there, and he needs to kind of be worried about that. So we're going to have a lot of leverage to give the quarterback a throw kind of in that underneath space underneath the route. And what the safety is actually expecting is that this short corner helps and drops deep underneath that corner post route and helps him out there. But if that corner does drop deeper than that, we have a wide open hitch route. And this is kind of where a stretch comes in, is that we're putting a route underneath the zone and we're putting a route over top of the zone, and we're telling this short defender, this short corner, choose one and we're going to throw it to the other. And that is a stretch. That's a prototypical stretch. And this is an example of a vertical stretch on a zone. And we can also vertically stretch deep zones. So on the top right here, if we just ran kind of, I guess you'd call it like a dig concept or an Anchor Mills concept, we can run a kind of like a deep in route underneath the middle safety, and then we can also run a post over top of the safety. We're basically telling him, okay, are you going to run up or are you going to run back? We're probably going to throw it to the either one. Both routes won't be open 100% route, or either of them won't be open 100% of the time, but that's kind of how a stretch works, is you put two routes on the edge of the zone and we're saying we're going to throw it to the one that you don't go to. So that's examples of vertical leverage, or vertical stretching, sorry. So now we're going to talk about horizontal stretches. And the best example of this, if we go back onto the right here against the cover 3, say we ran all curls with all 5 of our receivers. So we just ran curl, 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 and curl. There's only 4 short zones here. One of these 5 receivers is going to be open, and we're probably going to be talking about, I don't know, like this middle linebacker here. He's probably going to have to choose between that curl or the running back curling. And in that case, we're horizontally stretching his zone. We're putting 2 receivers on the edge of his zones, and we're saying choose one. So that's an example of horizontal leverage. This can also be done deep. So if we go back to the cover 2 here, what if we ran 4 verticals? So we just ran 4 streak routes up the sidelines and up the seams. These safeties are going to have to choose. Well, they're mainly going to have to choose. Their technique is going to be backpedal, but eventually they're going to have to choose. They're going to have to commit when we start to throw the ball. Are you going left or are you going right? We're going to throw it to the either one that you don't favor. So that's horizontal stretching. And once again, we can horizontally stretch a short zone. We can horizontally stretch a deep zone. We can vertically stretch a short zone. We can vertically stretch a deep zone. You can stretch any zone there is on the field, and most plays are designed with stretches in mind to beat zones. So that is stretching, and that's the main way that we are going to beat zones instead of man. Because against these zones, if we ran a streak route, we're not talking about stacking a defender like against the cover 2 here. There's no defender for us to stack. There's no one running with us. Against the cover 3, sure, we could talk about how stacking comes into play, because effectively, if we run a streak route up the sideline, the guy is essentially man-to-man with us, and that's true. But when we're talking about zones, we're mainly going to be talking about using stretches to beat them and not using leverage, mainly. So that is the primary ways that we beat both man and zones. And man, we use leverage, pre-snap and post-snap, and we also use pick routes to get in the way and to make some trash in front of defenders and screw up their coverages. And then versus zones, we use horizontal and vertical stretches. So if we go back to the zones real quick, we can also do a horizontal stretch and a vertical stretch in one, and that's called a triangle. So if we draw up a play here called snag, it's a pretty popular play. What we have is our outside receiver kind of runs like a slanting curl route just inside the original position of this slot defender. Our slot receiver runs a corner post route, and our running back flares out right. And what this does is this creates a triangle here, if you see this. We're saying we have a horizontal stretch on this flat defender, and we have a vertical stretch on, if we had, like, say, a cover 2 zone. So if you drew this once again, here we go. Against cover 2, we have a vertical stretch. It's just like the smash concept that we drew before. We have a vertical stretch on this corner. We're short on him and we're deep on him. And against the cover 3 over here, this flat defender, we have him to the left and we have him to the right with our flare out. So that's how you kind of incorporate all into one, both a horizontal and a vertical stretch called a triangle, to kind of beat multiple zones. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this all back together in one final play. So let's draw a smash concept on the left, and let's draw the slant out on the right. So against man, we have several options. we could look at the corners and we can say, okay, are you more than like the 8 to 10 yards off? Well, we're going to take our pre-snap alignment and we're going to throw it and we're going to get the free yards and get down the sideline. We can also look and say, okay, is there a slot defender like showing blitz? Okay, then we're probably going to throw that out route a bunch of the times because we know someone else needs to be responsible for that route. And then say they don't do anything pre-snap for us. Okay, then post-snap, we're probably going to do a pick play here. Our outside receiver is just going to run into the hip of this slot defender, and we're just going to throw this out route, or we're going to turn it into a wheel and throw that. We don't really care. And then additionally, if we talk about a cover one man, where we have just a safety playing middle and another guy playing the middle, this defender over the slot, he needs to chase this, and once again, we really favor this against kind of a cover one man where there's no deep safety to the outside. That does not exist. So we really like this corner route right here. So against man, we can take advantage of pre-snap leverage. Post-snap, we can do a pick route, which we love, or we have a lot of good routes versus cover one man that we really like. So that's what we can do versus man. Against zone, say we go back to the cover two, we have that flat defender and we have the deep defender. We love this smash concept against it because once again we have a vertical stretch on this flat defender that we're going to abuse a lot of the time. If we see cover two with this play, we're going to go to that smash concept on the left, that hitch into the corner post. We're going to be doing that like 75+% of the time. We're going to be throwing one of those two routes. Okay, but then say we get cover three. We have a corner bailing and we have a defender coming out and playing the flat. If this defender comes out and plays the flat too quickly, we're going to be throwing the slant. And if he delays onto that slant, we're going to be throwing the out. So you can see how in one play we have pre-snap leverage that we can take advantage of. We have post-snap leverage that we can take advantage of. We can do a pick play in this play. We can take advantage of that slant out. We have a vertical stretch against cover two. We have a horizontal stretch against cover three. You can see how this is how plays end up getting designed, is that you don't design a play to just beat one coverage. You use a bunch of different concepts in one play to beat every coverage. And that if your quarterback can recognize what he's facing, he can instantly know, okay, I'm seeing cover three, I know I'm going to work that slant out. And that's kind of what we're going to be getting into in the next few episodes, is we're going to be putting kind of how you get open versus these different things. We're going to be packaging them into plays as we see here. We're going to be talking about how do offenses kind of design these plays, like what are their considerations and what do they really look to abuse. And this is only kind of, we're just scratching the surface with it right here. So yeah, that leads us into the next few videos. Please check out if kind of this moved a little bit too quickly for you. Let me know in the comments. If you have any questions about things I talked about, post a timestamp and then post your question so I can go to that timestamp, see what I was talking about, and I will better explain it. And let me know what I can do better for you guys. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next episode.